So the floor is yours, Alex and Tim.
Thank you very much. And hi, everybody. Lovely to meet you all. So yes, I'm Alex. I'm from the University of Cambridge, but my background is actually in science documentary making. So I used to work at the BBC making science documentaries. And when I came back to academia in 2016, I was really surprised at what my new team were telling me about how science was being communicated within academia. And they, explained to me all the pressures that they were under to publish their work in particular journals and in particular ways. And it was really clear that the current way that people were having to publish wasn't supporting the open research practices that we were being taught. And so I came up with the idea of Octopus to try and help solve this problem. So I'm going to start by giving a little bit of presentation, introducing Octopus and my thinking behind the design of Octopus. And I'll explain how it works with the open research kind of workflows that we're getting used to. And then I'm going to hand over to my colleague Tim at JISC, who builds Octopus, and he's going to show you the Octopus platform. You can ask questions, in between those two. And then once we've had a good discussion about that, then we'll go through how to publish on Octopus and how to use it in a practical day-to-day sense in more detail. But it's also entirely up to you how long we discuss anything for. So feel free to put things in the chat whilst I'm talking or Tim's talking, if you want to remember them to come back to, or when we kind of hand over and we'll have a question and discussion period, just, use that to ask your questions. So I'm going to try and share my screen, first of all. Excuse me, whilst I concentrate a second. Got too many windows open. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. So Octopus it's open and working now, and it's free to use, and it's free to read, and it's free to publish on. And that's because we're sponsored, we're paid for by Research England, so the government funder for research in England. And we're in partnership with the UK Reproducibility Network, and we have been from the very start because we fit in so well with everything that the reproducibility networks are trying to support. And as I said, there's kind of ethical reasons to want to use the platform to try and help change the system away from the publish or perish system. But there are also practical reasons why researchers might want to use it. Not just that it supports open research practices, so it can be used for things like pre-registration, which hopefully you know about, but also things like big team science. So where you've got these big projects where everybody agrees on a protocol, and then lots of different groups go off and collect data according to the same protocol. This is a growing way of doing research in certain areas, psychology, neuroscience, I think some of the biological sciences as well. So this big team science is really well supported by Octopus because it's difficult to find journals to publish that kind of work in, and to publish it in the right way, where you've got lots of people collaborating. It's also really useful if you've got things that other outlets might not publish. So for researchers who've got what we call negative findings, replication studies, ideas that you're not going to test yourself, research problems that you need someone else from a different discipline to help solve, all of these things, small data sets. We've all got small data sets. So all of these things have homes on Octopus, and they're really important to share and to get credit for. So that's one of the things that really helps drive use of Octopus, is people trying to publish these things that they don't have places to publish elsewhere. So our little logo there, you can see free, fast and fair. Well, I've said it's free, obviously. It's fast because, like a preprint server, you can publish quickly with no barriers. So you can, as soon as you're ready to publish something and you click publish on Octopus, it gets published. And the fairness, I'll explain, because that's to do with the way that it's designed to help people get credit for their work. But it's really different from journals. So what you publish in Octopus is not a research paper like you'd publish in a journal. So I'm going to explain a bit about the design of it. And the design comes from trying to solve some of the problems in the research culture. As I said, these problems that my research team were telling me about, this publish and perish culture. So this is an extract on the screen from the guide for authors for one of the leading science journals. And the bits that I've highlighted in red there, I think really make it clear that what they're aiming for is a certain kind of reader. They want someone who wants to know, what's the take-home message from me from this work, who doesn't want the full details of the method, the data, the analysis. And it's all about this, getting this high impact publication. And this impact is measuring really popularity. So number of readers, number of citations. And this is really dangerous because good research doesn't always make a good story. And in fact, the very information that you need to know to assess whether something is good research or not is all those details of the method, actual access to check the data and the analysis. And that doesn't make a popular read. So we've got these two aspects fighting against each other. So there's this mismatch between what the journals are pushing people towards, so creating a good read for their readers, telling a good story with a good take-home message, which is usually about what people found and not about the methods, and what the research community need, which is full details of exactly what was done, with what result, whatever that result is, so things that didn't work as much as things that did, the opinions of other experts on how rigorous and trustworthy that work is. So these two different things need totally different kinds of writing. So in the first case, for these kind of give me the take-home message, then a narrative, a story might make sense for that. But it absolutely doesn't for the second. And it's not surprising that journals don't really want to serve this very small audience of people who do want to have all the data and all the code and all the methods. It's a bit of a thankless task without much of an audience, really. But the audience for it is other researchers, and it's really important that they have it. So I think the answer to this problem is to split these two jobs. And that's what Octopus is designed to do. So it's designed to be the new primary research record that sits alongside journals. So when there's something that's important to get to an audience in a concise, easy to read narrative form, you can publish that in a journal. And that's great. That'll disseminate it, get it to people who might want to use those findings. But for all the underlying work, Octopus is designed to sit alongside that system and publish all of that work or tie it all together. So it's got a different aim, it's got different audience, different function. And so everything that you do, whether that's your ideas, your analytical code, your data, your protocols, everything that researchers do in their lives might be published in specialist repositories. So you might be using GitHub, you might be using protocols.io, you might be using data repositories, anything like that. You can link it all in Octopus and get DOIs for each of those aspects of it and make sure that it's recorded for posterity so other researchers can learn from it. And it's also there for research assessment, so other people can peer review it. and your funders and your institutions can see that you've done that work and that you get credit for it. So, excuse me. So just like journals don't mind publishing things that have been on preprint servers, journals don't mind publishing things that are also in Octopus. So you can publish an article in a journal and keep all of the underlying work free for other people to read in Octopus. So it's a bit like, you can use it a bit like structured supplementary information to a journal article. But you can also use it to help create your open research workflow in the first place. And that's because of the way it's structured. So I'm going to go through how it's structured now to show you how it supports that workflow. Oh, sorry, I'd forgotten there was one slide before that. So just to recap some of the important features of Octopus, it's that it is digital first, so it's free to read, free to write, and it's designed for automatic language translation. So you can publish to Octopus in any language you like, because we want to make language no barrier to Octopus. And that means that other people can use automatic language translation to read whatever you've written in their native language. But as I say, it's got this different publication structure with these smaller units of publication, because the research process has a number of different steps within it. And depending on your field and what kind of research you're doing, there are, you may be doing some, but not all of these stages. So if you're working in theory, in a theoretical area, maybe you don't go out and collect results and data. Maybe you don't have real world use of your work, but everybody is starting with a problem that they want to try and solve, and a rationale or an approach to that problem, and then they do something. So they, even if it's purely theory, they do some work on solving that problem and thinking about it. But each of these steps requires quite different skills and quite different resources, and they're often done by different people. So if you're working in a team that's going out and doing experimental work, you may well have people who are specializing in doing analysis and people who are specializing in coming up with the rationale and the approach and the method in the first place. And at the moment, when you write a journal article, you force people to do all of this work, which might take years, and it might take a very big group of people. And you don't share any of it until you get to the end, because you want to write this story. And then you force this lovely narrative story, that tells this straight line from, we had this problem, we had this idea, we did this work, and it all worked out fine, to try and make a really nice, publishable, readable story. And I think that's fundamentally causing a lot of problems, because real life isn't like that. You have different people doing different things, some things don't work out, and all of this needs to be shared. So this is the Octopus structure. Every one of these boxes is a different publication, and it's linked so that you flow down from the research problem, but you can have lots of different ways of approaching that problem published by different people. And each of these publications can be a different person or a different research group, but everybody's kind of collaborating together to try and come up with solutions to this problem. And everything they do is published. So blind alleys, things that didn't work, are equally important in this kind of structure. So each of these boxes is a publication with its own DOI, and it has to be linked in this kind of chain, because we don't want people putting data out there that isn't linked to the method, because you can't reuse that data if you don't know how that data was collected and the important information around it. Equally, an analysis is no good without the data that it was based on. Now, you might notice there are 7 publication types, and the word octopus implies 8. And that's because the 8th type of publication in Octopus is a peer review. And these can be linked to any publication, of course. And it means that every stage of the research process is valued equally. And what's important is that every bit of work is done to the best standards possible. And all of this can be assessed, each of them can be assessed by peers. You can write a review, and those reviews can be written by anybody. And when we show you the system, you'll see how you can look up who's doing what on the system. So everything that you do gets linked to your name and your ORCID profile, and it's all visible by your institutions and by your funders. So they can see what you're doing and you can get credit for it. So this design of a linked chains of publications is designed to try and help people wanting to work in an open workflow. So I'm going to go through why we designed it the way we did. So firstly, the most obvious problem is that we all know how long it takes to write a paper and how much they cost to publish, and all of that time, all of those resources that you put into writing a paper. And that excludes so many people from sharing their work because they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, they don't have the incentives to write these papers, and especially if they fear that the papers aren't going to get published, like if they're negative findings. So Octopus is short publications, and they're completely, you can format them however you like. We don't have particular style that you have to adhere to. You write the publication to the length that you want to, means you can get it out there quickly, and it can be published at the touch of a button. So it hopefully makes things faster and much cheaper to get out there. Secondly, we know this big problem with publication bias. And we also know that what gets researched is biased towards what people think is publishable. And since journal publications have become this kind of be-all or an end-all of academic life, they're really biasing what people work on. And we all know about the problems that that causes. All the work that would be really useful to other people, but isn't being either carried out or published in journals because the journals don't think there's a big readership for it. And also, people we know have this terror of scooping, which means that people don't want to share work openly because everything for them at the moment relies on all the credit that they'll get is based on getting a journal publication right at the end of their work. So in Octopus, because you get credit for everything that you publish whenever you publish it, and that every part of the research process is given equal weighting, it means that you're kind of scoop proof, because people who, if somebody reads your brilliant idea, hypothesis, and then goes off and does the experiment, if they prove you right, you've got the idea. It's a bit like Peter Higgs in physics, who came up with the idea of the Higgs boson, the theory, and published it. And many years, decades down the line, when they built CERN and they were able to test his hypothesis and show it was right, he's the one that gets the credit. It's called the Higgs boson after him, because he published the idea way before anybody could go and test the data. So we want to do a similar thing for everybody here, where everything that you publish kind of makes it scoop proof, because you get your credit as you go. And it's not all about findings. Good ideas are just as important, good protocols. And these 8 publication types, as I said, they're designed to help good practice at every kind of research. So because they're each of them assessed and peer reviewed independently, it helps people put the effort into each stage equally and get the credit for each stage equally, and make sure that every stage is robust. And closely related to that is the problem that at the moment there's a lot of pressure to sell your findings, to get your conclusions to be positive. This pressure which creates what we all call questionable research practices. So things that try to get your results to fit your hypothesis. And those who specialize in roles like data collection or protocol design or analysis, at the moment, they don't get the credit they deserve for doing that, in an author list on a publication, on a journal publication, they're often the middle authors. And we know that that's not so good for your CVs. And often their work isn't shared in enough detail to be scrutinized anyway. Often the protocol's really, briefly covered in the journal. The analysis is, really you're just showing some real summaries of the analysis. You're not showing the entire analytical process. So there's a real problem with sharing everything. I'm hoping that the structure of Octopus encourages people to be able to specialize in different aspects of the research process and to get recognition for their specialism. So for every part of the process to be held up to the highest standards and scrutiny through peer review, and getting people the credit for doing that. We need a really solid bedrock of specialisms at every stage in the research process to make sure that it's all robust. And there's a lot more to research assessment on Octopus. As I've said, at the moment, we've got a real emphasis on the findings. And it means that peer review, which is a system under huge pressure already, is focused so much on the findings. We know that reviewers find it really difficult to review papers if you take out the findings and say, review the rest of it. So they're rarely looking specifically at the data or the analysis, but it's really important that they do. So open peer review and post-publication peer review, like we have in Octopus, I think is really important because it makes reviewing something that's public and that we can all read. But more importantly, I think, is the fact that the reviews are of these individual specialist publications, so directly a review of this protocol or of this data set, and that they can be done as soon as those are published. So you may have learnt about registered reports, this kind of journal publication. It is a kind of paper publication, but you submit it to the journal at the point where you've designed the protocol and before you collect the data. And that's designed to do two things. One is to allow peer review before you've gone to the difficulty and expense of collecting data. So it allows you to make sure that you've got the best protocol possible before going on to the next stage. But it also makes sure that the reviewers are reviewing on the quality of the work and not on the importance of the findings. So registered reports are fantastic and we love them and we will work closely with them. But Octopus is kind of taking that even further and saying you can peer review at every stage along the way. So every point of your research project, if you're doing the whole process in your group or on your own, you can get feedback to make sure that you're not carrying on building on something that could have been improved earlier on. And we know that a lot of early career researchers especially really appreciate this idea of getting feedback early. And one thing that we haven't released yet, but we are thinking of doing, is having quantitative metrics as well. So people can rate publications on a kind of 1 to 10 scale on predefined criteria. So those might be things like, have I seen this somewhere else before? So originality or the size of a data set, these kinds of things. But that's for the future. But we're thinking about how to help ensure that people are assessing the quality of work, intrinsic quality of work, rather than thinking about the importance of the findings. Interdisciplinary working. So at the moment, we know that journals create silos of work where people are reading their colleagues' work and people are working in very much the same field, but they're not necessarily taking into account work that's published in a different set of journals, but might be really useful to bring together. We want to really encourage transdisciplinary working. And it's becoming more and more difficult as there's more and more journals and more publications to be able to find what might be useful. So Octopus is one site for everything. It doesn't matter what field you work in, you can publish on Octopus. And everything is linked to these research problems. And you can have a publication that is linked in multiple chains. So if I've come up with some new theory about flow of liquids. Well, that flow of liquids could be important in medicine, it could be important in the oil industry, it could be important in some aspects of biology. So I can link it to different publication chains, but also any reader who comes along can also cross-link things. So if you found a publication on Octopus that other people should be reading in a different publication chain, you can make a cross-link and get credit for making a good cross-link. So hopefully this will all help us avoid repetition and waste of effort and help us find good quality work. And it just makes it more collaborative. Really want to change the nature of the whole research culture so that we're thinking in a different way. And I think, you know, if I publish data, I want other people in the future and all over the world to be able to analyze that data with their own skills and their own experience and maybe come up with different conclusions. So I think it's a very different but really exciting way of working. And finally, and I won't spend a lot of time on this, but I do think it can revolutionize funding and the way that funding's awarded, because so much work gets wasted going into grant applications and then other people reviewing those grant applications. If we use Octopus for open publishing and reviewing of things like research problems or rationales and approaches to those problems, those could be published and reviewed online on Octopus, really cutting down what you then need to submit for a funder. And in fact, funders could gold flag publications and say, we're willing to fund people to carry out this protocol because it's a well-designed protocol and well-reviewed. And now we're going to fund, say, 3 or 4 groups of people to collect data. It could really change the way that we think about funding. And I really hope that, you know, this can, yeah, just make the process very different and much easier for all of us. So fundamentally for me, I really hope that the design of Octopus can help change the research culture and the way that all of us approach our research. Because we're moving away from findings and impact being the most important thing, and instead thinking about the quality of every piece of research that's done in quite small pieces, I hope that it allows us each to think about being a specialist, really doing your bit of work to the best of your abilities, allowing other people to help give feedback on that, and then you can reversion your work in Octopus. So if somebody reviews it and says, it could be better if you did this, you can say, thank you, great, I will reversion my work. You could even invite that reviewer to be a co-author on the new version. And so I think it's just a way of changing the competitive, you know, I'm going to do all my work as fast as I can and not share it with anybody until I've got my paper, and then that gives me my CV points, into a way of thinking, I'm going to do my piece of work to the best of my abilities, put it out there, link it in with everybody else's work, and get the credit for doing a good piece of work. And it'll be really exciting to see what other people do when they build on that. So I'm going to finish up my little bit by saying, you know, we've thought about what's in it for all the different people within the scholarly system. And I think for researchers, the important things are trying to remove barriers to access for publication, to allow people to publish whatever they're working on, wherever they are, whatever their resources are, to be able to get priority for that. So getting their kind of CV points for doing that and saying, I came up with this first, I did this first, and making it easy to find other people's work, and making sure that everybody can publish everything that they do and get credit for it. I think journals can work really well alongside Octopus, and we've got partnerships with some journals already, and we're building more, where they really appreciate the fact that Octopus is doing something different that complements what they want to do. As I said, for funders, I think it can help cut down what they're wasting our resources on. And institutions, I think this is really important. Tim will show you how it helps institutions look at what every researcher is doing and help kind of assess what kind of researcher this is. Is this somebody who is publishing a lot of reviews and being really constructive? Is this somebody who's an ideas person? Is this a great data collector? Is this a great analyst? So hopefully it'll just give people a more rounded way of assessing researchers when they're looking to hire and promote people. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Tim. But also it's a good point if you've got any questions that you want to ask at this juncture.
Thank you, Alex. This was really nice and inspiring, and I think it really covers a lot of the things that especially African researchers like are going through. Especially, for example, most of African countries are low middle income countries, and the laboratories are not like super equipped like laboratories in the global north. So I've seen it with my own eyes, like researchers resolve to some brilliant techniques and ideas sort of to go around, you know, these things, and they get spectacular results, but then these things, like, no one sees them. Because maybe if the global north or other big labs see them, it would be an efficient way to cut cost, because it is effective and it is simple, so why not use it? So I think there are many questions in the chat, so
I'll go through them, shall I?
yeah. But one concern that I think I could say for all of us African researchers is it goes again to the idea of scooping.
Yes.
Because you know, you have a brilliant idea, but then as an African researcher in an African institution, you don't really have all the resources, you know, to conduct this research, let's say as quick as, for example, a laboratory in the US or UK. So then there is, and this happened, it's not really a fear. This is unfortunately things that we did go through a lot.
Yep.
You know, you have an idea and you trust someone like from a laboratory abroad, and you start discussing it with them, and then they just scoop it, and then like you just vanish. So I think that this is something that throughout this training, it's an issue that has always been coming up, is that, you know, my idea is, I think that this explains why like African researchers hold dear to their ideas.
Yeah.
And we really don't know how to solve that, you know. That is a big issue. Octopus could be a solution.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So I think you can treat it a bit like a kind of patent office.
Yes.
So that you are publishing, you get it on, you have the DOI, it's got your name and the date on, and you will always then have that proof that that was your idea at this date, at this, you know, and you published that. So you can always do that before you then go and speak to other people about it, and it should give you some protection. And I know that, you know, there are terrible stories, and it happens with preprints and stuff, of people going and publishing preprints elsewhere. But if you then go to that journal or whatever and say, look, here it is as a preprint, it's my work, they should be able to sort that out. I mean, I know that not all journals are brilliant, but you've got the evidence there.
I think you've just hit on a very important point. I think what we're lacking, or for example, talking about me as an African researcher, if this happens to me, like, where do I go? If I did my work, I did the proof, I like put it on Octopus, it has a DOI, but still someone like took over everything. Like, where do I, maybe this is beyond Octopus, but just I'm asking from your experience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if there are like a central place or somewhere that you can go and like make a complaint that this someone took my stuff.
Yeah. So there are two, there's no centralized place. And you know, this is a bigger problem than Octopus, but there are two avenues I would use for that. One is if it's been published in a journal, then journals, especially those that are signed up to I can't remember what it stands for, but COPE, which is about publishing ethics. But if you go to that journal and you write to them and say, here is what I published elsewhere, and somebody has essentially stolen it and sent it to you for publishing, then they should investigate that. And so good journals will do that. And as I said, I know not all journals are good.
Yes.
But so that's if it's been stolen in a journal. If it's been stolen by another researcher, then they should have, and again, not all institutions have it, but have research integrity officers. So you look for a research integrity office, or RIO, and for each institution, you can write to them and show the evidence of, here it is, I published this idea, this protocol, whatever, and somebody is now sending that in for their own grant applications or whatever they're doing. And that is research misconduct, and that should be investigated by that institution. And again, I know that not all institutions are brilliant, but that's the pathway. And some countries also have a national research integrity office, but I think that's relatively rare. So it's usually the institution.
Yeah, I think, because I've been talking to a lot of African researchers, and this always comes up.
Yes.
So I think if we could, and we know the advantages of open science, but then this is always the barrier that sort of, repels them from that. So I think maybe the open science community should start thinking about like making this centralized entity, that researchers coming from, Africa or any global South communities, that they could go and then they could really see, because you could like make a complaint, but then you don't really know what happened,
Yeah.
But then it's important for the whole world to see that maybe this researcher has been involved in integrity issues and so on. So I know this is beyond Octopus, but I really like to discuss that, because it's a real concern. It's a real concern for us in Africa. Unfortunately, yeah.
I think the only thing I can say is that we're hoping that Octopus helps because it gives you the evidence, so you can
exactly
evidence to wherever you can.
Exactly. This is my point. It's like a place to like stamp that this was me. I was the date and time that I was the one who had this idea or this hypothesis. So I think we could go on into the platform, because a lot of people are asking questions that I think your demonstration will answer most of them, but then we can go back to any questions.
I will just say that yes, after publishing on Octopus, you can go and publish on other journals. It's essentially, it's treated like a preprint server. So if the journal says it's fine for you to have published your work as a preprint, then that means it's covering Octopus as well. But if you've got any concerns, then write to the journal that you're submitting to and just double check with them. But I've not come across any, and we're asking individual journals and publishers, not come across any that would have any problem. So going to pass over to you, Tim.
Thank you very much. And hello, everyone. So I'm Tim, and I'm the product manager for Octopus. So I deal with a lot of the speaking to people and trying to find out exactly what it is that they would need from the platform, and then taking that away and turning that into designs and features for the platform that will hopefully mean we're making best efforts to deliver on the sort of goals that we want Octopus to achieve. And what I will do is I share my screen. There we go. You should be able to see the platform itself now. I'll just talk you through a little bit about the platform. Hopefully this will sort of implicitly answer some of your questions as I go. But as I mentioned before, we can always come back afterwards and revisit those questions if I don't manage to cover any. Right, so I'm assuming you can all see my screen fine. Just give me a shout out if you can't there, Alex.
All good.
Yeah, so there's a few things, brilliant. There's a few things that should be immediately obvious. I think the first one perhaps is these tiles up across the top here. So this is really a nice way to represent what Octopus actually does on a practical level. Because each one of these tiles is in fact a separate self-enclosed publication, complete with its own DOI and so on. So the idea is that researchers can start off over on the left with a research problem that's a very brief publication just describing what the gap in our knowledge is, essentially. So these are very short publications just spelling out what it is that isn't known at the moment. We then move into the hypothesis, then through to the methods, results, analysis, interpretation, and so on. Each is their own self-enclosed publication, focused very much just on a specific step of the research project, rather than being involved more broadly. The other thing you notice here is we don't necessarily have to have a single instance of each of these stages. So this example here, we actually have two different methods using interviews, and the other is testing the same hypothesis using focus groups. They've both had their own results collected and then been tied back together into a single analysis. That's not the structure that it has to take. In fact, you can structure this however you would like. You can have as many of each of these stages as you need for your research project. And that lets you do all sorts of things like, well, the example here of suggesting different methods, but also things like suggesting different analyses for the same data set, multiple hypotheses for the same research problem, and so on. So you can really build your series of publications here around how your research project is actually being conducted, rather than needing to try and fit your write-up into a predefined structure. The other quite exciting thing here is these publications don't actually have to be by the same group of people. Wandering data analyst. So let's say I'm a data analyst and I have a look at this publication here. And I think there's very interesting analysis going on here, but there are actually a few techniques that I think would be quite useful to apply to the data sets that this analysis is based
I'm
on.
sorry, Tim, to interrupt you, but your voice is really cracking up. I don't know if maybe you could turn off the camera, then.
Yeah, let me try that.
because-
Sorry,
Yeah, no
pop-up
worries.
saying my connection was unstable, so perhaps.
Yeah, it's really breaking off. Yeah.
Is that any better at all?
Not I
No.
wonder, would you like me to share?
Okay, well, yeah, do give me a shout if
Oh
you
no,
still
that's
can't hear me.
much better. That's better.
That might be an idea.
Yes,
Oh, is it?
yes.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was just giving an example of how this structure here doesn't necessarily have to be prescribed by a single research team. So it could actually be people who don't necessarily know each other working together on this structure here. And the example, I'll just recap it in case you couldn't hear what I was saying. The example I always like to use is that of a data analyst that's having a look at this publication, having a look at a piece of analysis.
Tim, you're breaking up again.
And I think it's interesting, but perhaps a data analysis technique that hasn't been applied here that they think would be quite useful as a way to investigate these data sets that we've got here. So, oh dear.
Sorry, I think it might be
if you wouldn't mind sharing your screen, Alex,
yeah, I
and I could try talking over it. Perhaps that might work.
Yep.
Okay, let's try that.
Can you see that fine?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Great. Off you go. I'll be your hand.
Okay. So essentially, the point I'm trying to illustrate here is that it doesn't have to be the same team that are working on these publications. So as another researcher coming and having a look at this structure here, you could take a look at what you've already got here and think, I can actually contribute to this myself. So there are umpteen ways that you could do that. It could be writing another analysis for the same data set. It could be suggesting a different method to test the hypothesis. Perhaps there's a technique you think could be applied there. There are many ways to do it. But the way all the researcher really needs to do is hit a little option that we have down the page to write a linked publication, which will let you sort of build on the back of the work that's already here. It obviously gives credit to the authors of the original publication that you're building it from, but it takes it out into a new direction on the back of what's already here. So hopefully what this will mean is that people can use the platform to fairly freely collaborate with each other without necessarily needing to go through a lot of steps of sort of working things out beforehand. People can just put a publication on the platform linked to what's already there to say, this is interesting and I'd like to build upon it in some way. And obviously we represent that relationship through the visual that we've got at the top there. So moving slightly down the page, the next thing I'll talk about is the author lists and how we do our authors on Octopus. So with the platform, the only barrier to publishing in any way is an ORCID account. So ORCID accounts are free, and you can sign up from their website. And once you have one, all you need to do, as you just saw that Alex did, all you need to do is log in through ORCID, and then you'll have access to all of the features that Octopus has to offer. Now, using ORCID as our account system also gives us a few things we can do. So we have a little user profile for each of the people on the platform. And if you wouldn't mind clicking through that, Alex. And as you can see on this page, we keep a bit of information about what it is that the author is doing all in one place here. So you can kind of check out the sort of activity that the particular person has. So starting off at the top, we have all of the information from a user's ORCID profile, employment, education, and their works published elsewhere. And then further down on the page, we also have a list of the publications that the users conducted on Octopus itself. And this includes any peer reviews that they've conducted, any feedback that they've given to other publications on the platform, and so on. And it's really just a way of keeping track of everything that someone's doing all in one place and giving some accountability for how they're behaving on the platform. Now, on that note of accountability and feedback, I'd probably better talk a bit about how we do research assessment and feedback on the platform. So if you wouldn't mind hopping back a page, Alex. So obviously we have this system where, because you're publishing in these smaller components, you can publish in theory very early. So for instance, if you're publishing a research problem, this is right at the start of your project. This is just when you've identified the gap in the knowledge. You've published your hypothesis, perhaps. That's also a very early stage. And as you go through your project, you're publishing each of these steps. What we can do with Octopus is by letting you publish so early, we can take advantage of the fact that you're still in a fairly exploratory phase of your project, to help Octopus become a place to refine your work in line with any feedback that you receive. And the way that we do that is through our peer review system, first and foremost. So unlike with the traditional publishing model, where a peer review would cover the entire context of a paper and therefore the bulk of a research project, with Octopus, peer reviews focus specifically on a single one of these publications, so a single one of these tiles that you can see across the top. And what that means is we have much more focused, granular peer reviews being left against these publications. So as an example, let's say there was a research method that I'd like to review, and this research method has a lot of code in there. If I were a programmer wanting to look at this code that's in the method, I could write a review just focusing on that code without having to worry myself about what's going on in the hypothesis or the interpretation or any other part of the project, and instead just look at this one stage and review that, which it means that our peer reviews are hopefully going to be more useful because they're more specifically looking at a particular stage. They're hopefully easier to write because they're a lot shorter, again, by being more focused, and more approachable for specialists. Because if I'm a data analyst, for instance, I'm not going to want to have to review someone's hypothesis or that sort of stage of their work, but I will very much be interested in their analysis specifically. And so this micro publications approach gives us the opportunity to do peer reviews in quite a new and hopefully quite exciting way, where they can be used much more as a tool for constructive feedback rather than as a gatekeeping step necessarily. Peer reviews are also done publicly, so your name is attached to them, and they're done post-publication. So it's not an editorial step at all. It's just something that any user can do against your publication to provide some feedback. So hopefully it's a little less high pressure than a traditional peer reviewing system. I will just segue into a question we just had in the chat, because it's quite good timing to answer that one, which is, how does Octopus enlist its peer reviewers? So peer review on the platform is done ad hoc. You're free to share your publications around to try and seek out reviewers. And we are also working with a few peer reviewing communities to see if we can get groups of peer reviewers on the platform interacting with each other's work through learned societies and things like that, to try and encourage more peer review on the platform. But ultimately, because these are being done as a constructive step rather than as a gatekeeping step, they're more spontaneous than an official editorial process that you might have for a traditional journal.
I think, Tim, the question is, sorry to interrupt you. Like if, for example, I want to review something on Octopus, do I get credit for that? Like, does my name pop up anywhere?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So we try to treat peer reviews as akin to any other sort of publication on the platform. So as you can see with this peer review here, it's got its own DOI and its own license, just as with any other publication on the platform. And you can also see the author's name is listed there against it. So as far as the platform structure is concerned, this is a publication. The reason we're doing that is because we believe that peer reviews need to be better incentivized. They need to be something that researchers are more rewarded for doing, so that there's more incentive for people to leave meaningful peer reviews. So we try and treat them as akin to anything else on the platform. As you can see here, as Alex switched over to the publication that's received the review, we indicate these reviews against publications on the platform. So we've got a little icon there for it. And for researchers to actually add a review, if you scroll down the page, Alex, you can see we just have this option here to write a review, and that's really all there is to actually starting the process of writing a peer review. If you were to hit that option, it would take you through to the publishing workflow, where you could build your peer review from there. So there's not there aren't too many sort of hoops to jump through to get to adding your peer review. So we don't have any barriers to publishing on the platform. So whilst these peer reviews are all well and good for providing constructive feedback, we also need to address the question of what there is to be done if there is a more major concern with the publication, something that can't really be captured via a peer review. And this is where our red flagging system comes in. So this option that you can see Alex is hovering over here, this opens up a modal where you can select certain major concerns about the publication. We have a short list of them here. We may need to append a few others to this, perhaps AI manipulation or something like that. But essentially, the user is able to select from one of a few major concerns and add a few details about exactly what it is that their concern is for this publication. Once they submit that, this will do a few things. It will mark it against the publication, a bit like how a peer review did. There's just a little red flag icon that people can see so that everyone knows that there is a major concern that's been raised with this publication by someone else. It will also record it against my profile if I were the one to raise that red flag, so that people can see how I'm behaving and how I'm giving this feedback, to make sure there's some accountability for me. And finally, it will open up a dialogue between myself and the authors of this publication, where we can discuss the concern that I have and hopefully work towards resolving it. So there's a sort of almost a chat thread between myself and the authors that will open up through me raising this red flag. That thread is also publicly available so that everyone can have a look at the sort of discussion that was had around this concern. And at the end of that discussion, hopefully that leads to the person who raised the red flag rescinding it and it being struck off from the publication. So we have these forms of research assessment, which are designed to let people gather feedback in a constructive manner quite early on. And we want to make sure that people can make the most of that feedback so they can actually put their best foot forward in line with the feedback that they've received, to make sure their work is of the best possible quality that it could be. And that's where another feature that we've got comes in, which is our reversioning system. So this, I mean, I think it's relatively self-explanatory what it does. Essentially, this feature lets you publish a new version of your existing publication. So you can see here on the screen, we have this drop down with an option to create a new version. And what that does is it allows you to reopen up this publication for further modifications and publish a new version of it kind of over the top of the old one. For posterity, people can still go back and access the previous version of the publication. But it allows you to take account of the feedback that you've received so far and refine it to add in any extra details or anything like that that might come out of a peer review. So again, in the same way that our peer review is designed to be more constructive and perhaps a little bit lower pressure, we also have this system where there's an author of a publication. You don't need to worry if there's perhaps something that's needed a bit of adjustment in your publication, because you can add that in afterwards. I think that's all of the sort of high level points of the platform without digging into any depth into things like the metadata and so on. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention there, Alex, before we take it to questions.
No, I think that's given everybody a little bit of sight of the platform and an overview. So I don't know if there are any more questions at this point. There was one in the chat about the difference between Octopus and GitHub, which might have become more obvious now we've shown you the platform, but essentially they are quite similar in a way, but Octopus is designed not just for code, but it's also, whilst GitHub is a bit more of a constantly evolving workflow, Octopus is designed not so much for you to be, updating it every day and working on it every day. It's more a place to publish your hopefully final version. And of course, as Tim's shown you, you can get feedback and then reversion, but it is sort of, a version of record. And so it's not something that you would reversion day after day, because every time you reversion, you kind of lose your previous peer reviews and any, in the future when we have quantitative ratings, you'd lose all those. So it's something that you do once or twice at most. Whilst GitHub is a much more everyday working platform.
And the other thing I'd note there is GitHub and many other platforms, we tend to find that a lot of people doing open research have fairly disparate platforms that they're putting their work onto, because some of these are specialists. So GitHub being a great example of a relatively specialist platform for storing your code related to your research. What we do with Octopus is try to be the place where you pull together pieces of information like that. So whilst we're not directly like GitHub, we do have the capability for you to record the details of your GitHub repository against your publication, so that you can use Octopus as the overlay for what's on GitHub, do a write-up of it, and have people be able to easily access the rest of your code and things like that that's on GitHub or any other specialist repository. So hopefully Octopus is quite a nice place to tie things together from various other platforms.
Yeah. So Octopus, we're designing it to fit as much as we can in with other things that you might use in your open research workflow. So if you are using protocols.io, Open Science Framework, any of these repositories, GitHub, any of these other places, you can link all of that together into your research chain in Octopus. And when you publish, and we will show you the publishing workflow in Octopus, when you publish, you have the opportunity to put in URLs to point people towards work that you've got on other platforms that you can bring together. There's a question in the chat, elaborate on review of research questions published on Octopus by funders. Yes, so this is something that we are talking to different funders about, and that is using Octopus as a place where potential funders can publish questions that they're interested in, or they can use Octopus when researchers want to submit grant applications to a funder. So an example of the first one is in the UK, the government has areas of research interest, they're called, where different departments, so say the agriculture department might be interested in sustainable farming questions, and they might have 3 or 4 things that they're interested in funding researchers to do more work on. They, at the moment, have a document on their website where researchers can look at that. What we've done is pull that into Octopus. So in hopefully a couple of months' time, all of the areas of research interest from across the UK government will be published on Octopus. And it means that when a researcher finds a research question and they've got something to contribute to that problem that the government's posing, then when they publish work linked to that problem, they have the option of passing their contact details on to that department, saying, if you want to talk to me more about this, then here are my contact details. And that's something that could happen with any country where funders who have research problems that they're interested in funding can put these onto Octopus or build a system that automatically puts them on Octopus. And we're very happy to work with institutions to do that. And the other aspect is where funders are already inviting grant applications. We're talking to funders about whether they would be happy for researchers to put basically the research question and the hypothesis rationale onto Octopus, and then submit the grant application referencing that, because that gives the applicant, the researcher, the kind of patent stamp that we were talking about to say, this is my idea, and here it is publicly with the DOI. So they're then less worried about submitting it in a grant application where they may feel they might get scooped by other people. And it also cuts down on the amount of research that amount of work that researchers are having to do, because they're getting credit for that. It's not wasted effort submitting it to a grant application if that doesn't then get funded. Plus, the reviewing of that grant can happen openly as well. So the reviewers could also use Octopus to review that. So it just makes the thing more transparent. So we're talking to different funders about those sorts of things. I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't think I've
there was a question previously, and I think it's already like answered, is that you don't need an APC to publish on Octopus. It's all free. This is very important.
Yes, very.
And then there was also a question about what is the visibility influence of Octopus if we publish on work there. So I think you've talked a lot about that, but I don't know if you want to add anything else. Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about it. I mean, one of the things that we are working on is making sure that it's things published on Octopus get indexed in, PubMed, these kinds of indices. So that's something that we work on behind the scenes all the time. I mean, the more people that use it, the more that we've got an argument for people making sure that we are indexed. So it's a kind of virtuous circle. We have over 1,000 people using Octopus already now. Obviously, they're not all publishing. A lot of them are logged in, but they're reading, they're not necessarily publishing. But we are getting a good number of publications now, and you can go on and have a browse.
Yeah, I think it's going to revolutionize the publishing system, and I think that you guys are going to get some resistance from those big publishers.
We can talk about that, because so there are a few things. Tim's mentioned one or two of them. So these are things that initiatives that we're working on. One is in training. So training for master's students, undergraduate students doing projects, doctoral students, using Octopus as a way to help train young researchers, early career researchers in open science practices and in good practice just generally along your workflow. So for instance, some institutions where students get to choose from a range of projects, where the professors come up with a range of projects, they can put those projects as research questions into Octopus, and then the students can then attach their research chain from those problems. So that we know that that's being used, and it's being used in doctoral training centers as well. We're also talking with scholarly institutions. So, like the words have gone out of my head, but where you've got a group that work on a particular subject. And we know that early career researchers really want this early feedback, as I said. So one thing that we've been talking to those groups about is them asking some of their more senior fellows to commit to, say, doing 3 peer reviews each of early career members of their societies. So they publish, say, their hypothesis, maybe their method, and then the fellows, the more senior group members of those groups, have committed that they will do a peer review to really help those early career researchers. So if you're in a group like that, maybe that's something that you can consider doing within the group to help the early career researchers and to help them get their work in the best possible form.
And I think the benefits are countless, to be honest. Yeah.
So shall I talk a little bit now about, if you want to publish, how to go about thinking about the difference, because it is quite a different mindset when you're maybe used to writing papers or you've been trained to write papers. Just there are a couple of things that are different when you want to publish on Octopus. So I'll just share my screen and just talk about that. Sorry, I have to concentrate when I'm sharing my screen because I've got too many windows open. So, you know, we've talked about how the publications on Octopus are really quite different from those in a paper. So in a paper, you all in one publication, you probably have an introduction. Some fields have a section for hypotheses. You have methods, you have results, you have a discussion. Sometimes you have a different conclusion section. But in Octopus, you have these branch chains where you have these different publication types. And really the difference comes in a couple of places. So the result, the problem and theoretical rationale, and the results and analysis. So I was just going to talk through an example, and this is something where I had an existing paper that my research group had published here on the right-hand side. And we published this in Royal Society Open Science, which is one of the journals that's partnered with Octopus. But we published it during the COVID pandemic, before the partnership with Octopus. And it was a really massive paper, 44 pages, 5 research questions. We had qualitative work, we had quantitative work, really big experiments. We wanted to publish it all in one go because this was work that could be useful during the pandemic. So that's why we put it all in one paper. But it's a bit impractical, and it meant that not everything that we'd actually done kind of neatly made it into the paper. So it was a perfect chance for us to use Octopus after publishing the paper to then give readers a kind of a different way of accessing all that information and possibly some extra information. So as I've said, the different areas, the first thing to think about is that Octopus publications don't have this, you know, paper structure where you have an introduction. Instead, you have a research problem and then the rationale and hypothesis of how you're going to approach that problem. So just taking that paper as an example, I'll show you how different it is and how I then broke down a paper and published it on Octopus, which is something anybody can do. So this is some of the introduction to this whopping great big paper on Royal Society Open. So it had this general introduction, and then it actually ended up having these little subsections, which were really different research problems. So when I wanted to publish this on Octopus, what I did was this first general introduction was a problem of its own. How best to communicate people's personal risk from COVID-19. So here on the left-hand side, here's the paper, and here on the right-hand side is the Octopus publication. I have actually, it was a little bit longer than this. I've just cut it off so it fits on the slide. So you can see that it's pretty much a copy across. I tweaked the wording a bit to make sure that it stood on its own. But really, this is, you know, this is a good length for a problem publication. Doesn't need to be any longer on Octopus. So they're quite easy to write, quite quick to write. So that was one. But then you can see below here on the Octopus publication, there are research problems below this in the hierarchy. So this is a general problem, but then you can break it down into more specific problems. So these are publications linked to that original research problem. I do want to try and get this better visualized on Octopus, so apologies that they don't show up in the top here. We're working on that. So here on the left are some of those individual problems that were introduced in the research paper. And here on the right is one of those in Octopus form. So this one, again, copied across pretty much straight away. It needed very little extra introduction because it's linked to the problem above it. So in Octopus, you don't need to repeat anything that's in the publication above it in the chain. All of that general introduction to the problem of communicating personalized risk is already kind of published and there. So this then just needs to cover this little extra bit, and it's quite a well-known problem in the field. So what I'm doing is essentially, in a few sentences, really, I'm citing the classic work that sets up this problem in the field that's already been published. I'm just putting it in the context of COVID, but really it's very short publication. So that one was really quick and easy. That's a publication in a few minutes. The next one I had to think about a little bit more, because when I looked at this paragraph or two that I'd written in the paper, the second paragraph started, one method of approaching risk communication is this approach. Now, those words set off a little alarm bell in my mind, and I thought, one method of approaching, I'm thinking this isn't the problem now. By that second paragraph, I'm already talking about the rationale and the approach. So actually, this problem is really short. Sorry, previous slide. So the problem published in Octopus is just the first little bit stating a really short problem. The second bit, one method of approaching, is the beginning of the rationale. So it's the next publication in the chain. So I tweak the text in other ways to make it all stand alone. But essentially, if you've got a paper that you've already published, you can then take the information and republish it in Octopus in this more broken down format, but just have a think about that, particularly that introduction section, separating it into where you're just talking about the research problem, that's your problem publication, might be 2 problem publications, and where you start talking about how you're going to approach that problem, and that's your rationale publication. You can see how short these publications are. So then the other thing that I thought I'd just draw your attention to is results and the difference between results and analysis in Octopus. So in a traditional paper, certainly in the fields I work in, which are the sort of psychology areas, these tend to be treated as one lump together. In Octopus, they're separate. The results are your data or your sources if you're working in somewhere where you're going to take data from another source. I mean, you might be working in literature where you're using a book as a source, but it might be that you're using somebody else's data, something that's published from anywhere else. So the results are just exactly what you found or what you're basing your analysis on. And your analysis is anything that you did to that data or that object of study. So what the point of separating these two is that it ensures that the raw results, what somebody else would need to be able to do a different analysis, is available to them, so that it allows other people to analyze the same results in different ways. So here's an example. This is again from that same paper. So this was a piece of quantitative work. So we were collecting data, numerical data from out in the world. And the text describes when we did the study, so when data was collected, where the ethics came from, because we needed ethical approval, where we got the samples, so this was members of the public, so how we recruited them, what they were paid, what platforms they were using to do this online survey. So all of the background information that somebody would need to be able to reuse this data and understand it. And then we describe how many data points, and we have some graphs that show the demographics of that population. And some, raw data descriptives. So we could plot a couple of the variables, but we're not analyzing it. We're just showing you what's in this data set. And ideally, we'd link from this publication to where the raw data is available. And here is an example from some qualitative work. So this was interviews with people. And again, we're giving the demographics of the participants, so what ages they are, genders, ethnicities, what experience they had with COVID, which was the subject of the interviews. And then we have this statement here at the bottom that says full qualitative data is not publicly available in order to help protect the anonymity of the participants. So we couldn't make all the data available. So it's very difficult for somebody else to analyze that. But that's just the case sometimes with your data, especially where it's qualitative. You can't release it to protect people's anonymity. But we're giving as much information as we can so that people who looked at our analysis knew what we'd based it on and what the results were. So another thing which I just wanted to draw your attention to, which Tim already has, but you could see the analysis here is done by a different person. It's done by Gabe Recchia in this case. So that's ensuring that the analyst is getting the credit for what they're doing. And it's a different person from the person that collected the actual data. So that's just a couple of things that I wanted to draw your attention to help you think about when, if you want to publish on Octopus, how to approach those different publication types. I'm just having a quick look at the chat to see if there's some questions there. There's a question about how long does it take to get an API key access, which I will ping over to Tim. Are papers published on Octopus recognized for academic promotion and upgrading in academic institutions? Well, this is a question really for the institutions. They have a DOI and they absolutely should be, but you should check with your institutions, as they certainly are in many institutions. So one thing that is built into Octopus is that we are integrating with a lot of institutional systems, certainly in the UK, where everything that's published on Octopus is automatically put in that institution's scholarly repository. So where an institution collects publications from its own staff, it's automatically pushed into that. So it's a question for each individual institution. But if you want us to come along and talk to your institution and explain what Octopus is, and then we're very happy to do that. We're doing that a lot, and just making sure that everybody understands what these publications are, and the reasons why people do them, which are because they're doing the best quality science. Are Octopus publications indexed? Yes and no. In some indices and not others at the moment. So we're working with as many as we can to try and make sure that they get indexed. It's incredibly tediously technical about why some indices don't index them, because sometimes it depends on whether they're peer reviewed or not. So to give examples, I think if you use Google, and we're working with Google Scholar. I haven't tested it. I'm not sure if we're on Google Scholar at the moment. Those are certainly find Octopus publications. And if you use Google non-Scholar, the normal one, those find it. We are working with the Science Citation Index. There are reasons why we're not in the Science Citation Index, and that whole Clarivate work, which covers a lot of the indexes. And that's because they will only cover peer-reviewed publications. So we're working with them to make sure that we can be covered in the same way as preprints. So that's a piece of work that we're doing at the moment. Tim, I don't know whether you can fill in any more, because I'm not an expert on indices. And can you also talk about APIs?
Yeah, I think you summed it up fairly well regarding indexing papers. It's essentially, yeah, to be very brief about it, it's a chicken and egg situation. We're trying to make sure that the platform is going to get the attention it needs, and through its growth become more desirable for indexing services to include in their services, but vice versa, they're not all jumping to include it in their services until we're sort of already a well-established part of the research infrastructure. So we're working on it and trying to have conversations. We're going to speak with Google Scholar soon to try and make sure that we get included in there. Yes, regarding API key access. So at the moment, we're in the process of documenting our API. So the entire platform's been built with an API that can be used to do pretty much everything that a normal user can, but obviously through the API instead of the UI. And what we need to do at the moment is make sure that it's properly detailed and that you can see exactly how to use it. So what I'll do, let me just get a link to the documentation that we've got at the moment. There it is. And so on here, there should be an email address that you can use to get in touch and ask for an API key. The delay on that shouldn't be too long. The main thing is at the moment, we're not giving out API keys sort of too widely, purely because we're still in this stage of working things out around them. But if you get in touch with the email on there, then we should be able to get you set up with one in sort of a couple of days.
Great, thanks, Tim. API is not my speciality. So indices and indexing, yes, thank you. I will make sure that we do as much work as we can on that, Tim. That's something for us to take as a point that we need to absolutely concentrate on that in the next couple of months.
If I could come in, I think what was being said in the chat is, yes, this is a big problem in Africa. And I think not just in Africa, in all of the world, you know, people are sort of looking at those index journals. So I think we should be able to make kind of a differentiation, because Octopus is not really acting as a journal.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it? Or are you guys trying to act as a journal?
No, and that's, I mean, that is, you're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head that a lot of these indexes are set up for journals. And so when we talk to them, they go, oh yeah, you don't fit our rules for journals. But we're not the only alternative publishing platform, you know, and preprint servers also have different setups from journals. So that's why a lot of these indexing organizations are having to rewrite their rules and sit down and rethink how they specify, because as you say, they're designed to go, we index journals, are you a journal? And we go, no, and they go, oh.
Yeah. I think that this is really important, and all like the idea of open science, I think generally we're trying to move from like the traditional journal, you know, view and the obsession about indexes and so on. But I think, yeah, as I think Banjo just added some indices, maybe Science, Douage, Google Scholar, you said you're already doing PubMed, you're already doing, but I think it's going to be a challenge, especially in Africa, because everyone is really just trying to like publish in those Q1 journals, you know. So I think this is why we are doing this program, you know, the local needs training program, is that we want, and this is why we decided to go with the grassroots, because we've tried like to spend a lot of time talking about this to the stakeholders, to those on the top, but then like the system works fine for them so far, but the system is unfair to those at the grassroots. So what we're hoping, we know that this would take time, but since we will have local network leads who will go to their local institutions and you know, start talking about these things, we hope that we sort of see of a snowball effect that will go on. And I really like what you said, that if you're willing to talk to institutions, you know, because everyone in this training is actually belongs to an institution. So I know it would be a lot of work, because I think we have over 30 African institutions currently represented. But I think it would be important, you know, for them to see you, you know, because I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but we trust more, you know, when it's someone from the global north coming and telling them like other institutions from the global north are doing that. So I think it's it will be very helpful if we can do that in the future.
Absolutely. So I put my contact details and Tim's contact details in the chat, and I'll do it again. We've got packages that we can send to each of you, which have things like slides. We've got leaflets, PDFs. We've got a little animation that explains Octopus. We've got lots we can share with you if you want to share these with your colleagues and spread the word. But also very happy to give talks at your institutions, sit down and talk with people in your institutions who need to know about Octopus and understand more about it. So yeah, really happy to do whatever is useful for you. I'm just reading in the chat about ranking you based where your publications are indexed. Yeah, this is a problem, and it's a problem globally as well. What I would say is that if there is a lot of work that I'm sure everybody is doing, it's probably not just me, that doesn't end up getting published in a high-ranking journal. So if you are doing work that you are going to go and publish in Science, in Nature, in Cell, whatever, then absolutely, I would say send it for a journal, but also ask that journal if you can publish alongside in Octopus. And I would be astonished if they say no. And if they say no, send them to me. If you've got work that you are not probably going to get into a publication, so say you have a small data set, say you've got an idea, say you want to, you're an analyst and you want to do some analyses and you're using data sets that are available in Open Science Foundation or whatever, that you're using data sets from elsewhere, and you think that this is actually going to be quite tricky to publish in a journal, but this is the work that you're interested in doing or you've already done, publish it in an Octopus, get it out there. And then you've got DOIs and you've got the potential for getting credit for work that you wouldn't have elsewhere. So I would say use these two strategies. Use Octopus absolutely for things that you wouldn't get published elsewhere, but also use it when you are publishing elsewhere and ask to publish it alongside it, just like you would a preprint or just like you would put your supplementary information in. So I think these are the two ways that we can use Octopus at the moment, and hopefully things will change.
Yeah, and I think there is a third way, just the example that you just showed us, which is if you already have a publication, and I think that this is something that I'm going to do instantly, this automatically takes the fear of scooping because it's already published, but then it will train you on how to use the platform. And if you get, like, for example, people who are collaborating or are doing new analysis, it will be proof, for the community that you're going to talk to. Oh, look, this was an old publication of mine, but when I placed it in Octopus, I was able to get new feedback, maybe discover new findings and new applications.
Yeah.
So I think this is something I would definitely do. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've reminded
Go
me,
ahead,
actually,
Sarah.
there was the question about visibility, which I didn't actually address. And Tim, you might have time, or you might have at your fingertips the viewing figures, as it were. But I was actually really surprised, which sounds bad, but how well read publications on Octopus are. I think they're probably better read than many journals. I don't know why, but we've got high visibility in terms of people reading the publications. Tim has the statistics, but I don't know if he's actually got them to hand. But take it from me, things get read when they're in Octopus.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. So as an example, in the last month, so in June, we had 2,200 specific publication views. I think it's been a while since I actually worked out a stat for it, but I think on average, each publication was getting sort of 150 or 200 views or something like that, which is, for fairly specialist publications, I think is a pretty good stat.
Yeah, it's a lot higher than some journals. So absolutely, if you've got publications that you've published elsewhere, you can get extra visibility by putting them into Octopus. But do think carefully about how to split it up. We've had a couple of people try and publish their entire paper as a problem, and we're having to get in touch with them and ask them to reversion it and split it up properly. So yeah, just bear that in mind. I think I have if you've got any questions about the publishing process, we can absolutely talk you through that, but it might be better to do it kind of one-on-one. So if it's not obvious, then come to us. But, you know, in order to publish, it should be relatively clear. You can go to a publication and click publish a linked publication, as we showed you, and it should walk you through the process. The biggest stumbling block people find is that every publication has to be linked to an existing one. So you've got to find the topic or an existing publication that you want to link to. So my advice is to go to the site, search for the topic that best represents what you're publishing on, and then find the nearest thing to what you're working on, and then click write a linked research problem. That's how I would go about that.
So I was wondering, because I feel like I've been talking a lot because I'm really excited.
Not as much as me.
Oh, and we keep telling the trainees, like me and Emmanuel, we're not experts. So we are learning from these sessions as much as they are. So I wanted to see if anyone would like to raise their hand. I don't know if Alex and Tim, you have other things that you want to present, or should we?
I can talk you through the publishing process if that would be helpful to people, but it might be much more helpful if you've got specific questions to keep discussing those. So it's entirely up to you.
So I don't know what you guys think. Does anyone would like to raise their hand and ask something? Because I see many questions were asked in the chat. Okay, yeah, Paul, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really gained a lot from today's training from Alex and a partner. Then I just want to ask that I've, like some of us in Africa, in researchers, we have some links in academia, in a lot of repositories. Is there a way we can really connect? Like me now, I have worked in ResearchGate, in Google Scholar, in academia, in Kudos. Is there a way we can link all this together in Octopus? So that, because as early career researchers, we want our visibility to be, at least we want to be known for what we are really doing. Is there a way we can link our work? We have some works in preprint servers too.
Yeah.
Is there a way we can link our work in Octopus? Because I really love this topic very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So it's a kind of a yes and a no. I think I'll share my screen and I will show you the publishing process, because that will show you how to link things together. But you mentioned things like ResearchGate and preprint servers. Because those are publishing papers, it's not so easy to link them in to the Octopus research flow. So this I'm showing you now is our test bed, not the live server, because I don't want to accidentally publish something on the live server. So it's got some slightly weird publications in, and I'm just going to pick one at random in order to get into the publishing flow. Sorry, it's also a little bit slow because it's our test publication. So here's one of Tim's rather brilliant test publications. I'm going to use this. Imagine that this was the some topic that I actually work on, like COVID transmission or something. And what I want to do is publish some work of mine that's related to this. So first of all, I need to sign in, because to publish on Octopus, you have to sign in so that it knows who you are. So I'm going to sign in via ORCID, which you saw me do earlier. Luckily, I've got my password already saved. So once I'm signed in, and apologies, it's all a little bit slow. then it'll allow me to publish. And I'll just show you the basics of that and how you can tie in publications from other places. So say I want to write a linked publication, and I'm going to write a research problem associated to this. Obviously, here is the author guide. So when you've published for the first time, just have a quick look at that. It'll give you some things. But my keyboard is a bit sticky. So I would give it a proper title. It's going to be a research problem. I confirm that's the correct publication type. And the reason I have to do that is because every publication type has a different publication form that you then fill out. So when I create this publication, it gives me basically here on the left-hand side, you go through the process. So I'm going to, yep, I'm happy with the fact that it's going to be Creative Commons license. That's all fine. I can save as I go along, but I'm not going to bother because it'll be slow. The next thing it asks me to do is select my affiliations. And the reason it does this is because this will allow your institution to know that you've published something. So going to make sure it's got my university affiliation attached to this publication, click next. Now, because everything has to be linked to an existing publication, I've already linked it to this slightly weird research problem. I could link it to another research publication because you can have multiple branches, but otherwise that's easy. So it's quite quick. I can import my work that I've already written in Word, say, or I can copy and paste it into here. If I were entirely prepared, I'd have shown you how to put references in, but you basically paste your reference list in here. And when you do that, it instantly formats them and pulls out the DOIs and all of that sort of thing. So it's got quite a nice system for references. You put in a short description, you put in some keywords. Again, I'm not going to bother with things that you don't need to worry about. You put in any details of funding to make sure that your funder knows what you're published, and you select your co-authors, and you do that by email. So if I had a co-author like Tim, I would put in his details and add him, and then it will make sure that he's signed off on this publication at the same time. Now, I am now realizing, and Tim probably shouting at me with his mute button on, that I've selected a type that doesn't allow me to add. Oh yeah, no, here it is. So link to part of this work hosted elsewhere. This is where you link your other work in. So say I had some work on GitHub or OSF that was relevant to this publication. Now remember, this is the problem publication. So this is why I said it's a yes and a no. You're not going to link in a whole paper from ResearchGate, but if this problem includes some something from somewhere else, so say actually I've already published this on OSF.
Alex, we cannot hear you.
Oh, sorry. So I was just saying, if you have information that you've published somewhere else, so say from Open Science Framework or GitHub or anywhere else, this part is where you can link that work to there. So you can put in the URL here. I would just paste it in. I'd write a short description and save that link. Whoops, I should put in a URL. So then it saves that publication and that link to it. So if you've got work anywhere else, you can just keep adding those links to this publication here. And then when I preview this publication, it's not going to be the world's best looking publication because I've just put in some test data. It'll allow you to have a look. This is its title, its author, the information, and here is where it's then linking to where I've put it elsewhere. So say the problem that I've already described on OSF. And that's where it's all ready. And it's I can go back and I can edit that, or I can request approval from my co-author, Tim, and that will then email it to him and he will sign it off. And once it's all signed off, we can then publish it. So that is the important bit where you can link together work that you've put elsewhere into your Octopus publication chain.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That's all right.
So I guess the question is, why can't, for example, if this is work that is building on research that I've already published, so can I link this paper, you know, the past paper that I did publish, or no?
I would use that as a reference. So if you're building on, I'd put that in the references. So,
okay.
So references are just like you would expect them to be in a paper. You know, this is something that, you know, I'm building on work published in X, and here's a reference to that. But that bit for link to part of this work hosted elsewhere, that's saying, you know, here is my analytical code, or here is a video of this protocol. So it's a slightly different thing. One is, here's a reference to previous work, and one is, here is some more of this work.
I think if you did want somewhere to kind of just showcase the work you've got more generally rather than in relation to a specific publication, I'd actually recommend ORCID itself. So we obviously authenticate our accounts through ORCID. And if you have an ORCID account, you have your profile for yourself with your information about, you know, where you're a researcher at and things like that. And as well as publications that get added in by your institution or by journals and things like that, you can also add links out to, you know, perhaps your paper in ResearchGate or preprint server or wherever it may be, and record that against your profile so that you can share that and people can see everything that you've got all in one place there.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah. So are there any questions? Anyone else would like to raise their hand and ask? Or maybe, because I think Alex and Tim, you are still open, you know, to suggestions that could help make the platform more usable. So I think, guys, is that right? I don't want to be saying.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. So yes,
yeah.
You know, this platform, we've been live now for about 18 months, but we're building on it all the time. So there's new features coming through all the time. And we do have a mailing list if you want to join the mailing list so that you get updates on that. And I'm hoping that Tim's busying himself in the background to put the link in the chat. You can keep up to date, but we also run sessions where come along and give us feedback. And if you just want to email us or just speak now, if there's things that you already spot that you would really like as improvements, absolutely let us know, because we're working on it all the time, trying to make it better.
So I think it's a good chance to, you know, try to project some of the challenges that an African researchers could present. One of them is actually something that you already said, is that Octopus supports different languages. So, for example, if because already in this group, you know, we have French speakers who are not that fluent in English. So if I want to search for publications, for example, I know that I can publish in French, but then if I want to search for, you know, publications in Octopus, can I search in French, for example? Or like, does the already published parts, like they can be translated to other languages, right?
Yeah, very good question. I'm going to pass over to Tim to talk through the search because I know he's been rebuilding it recently.
Sorry, would you mind repeating the question? I was digging out the sign up
Oh,
link there.
sorry, Tim.
No worries. One of the things that you guys talked about is that that Octopus supports languages. So if you're a researcher, for example, that's not fluent in English, then can you like search in French and then still find relevant publications? If you want to make this very first link, you have to search Octopus, right? For already existing publications. So do I have to do all these searches in English, or I can do them in French or any other language?
You can do them in whatever language you want, although at the moment it will search based upon whatever language the publication is in. So if you searched in French, you would get French publications. We don't have any sort of translation built into the search function itself. It's something we could look at implementing, but I'd imagine it'd be quite a complicated thing to build in a way that would sort of be consistent across different languages. But it's certainly something I should note down and go and have some conversations about whether and how we might be able to build that, because that would be really nice as a way to really make the platform work for everyone a bit more
Inclusive. Yeah, it would make it
exactly.
inclusive, and you don't because it would be a shame like if you searched in French and you only got publications in French, for example, then you're missing out on a lot of other publications. Yeah.
It's really important. Initially, I wanted to plug in automatic language translation as a feature of the site, but it's turned out, as automatic language translation has grown so fast over the last couple of years, it's kind of easier to let your web browser do that. We will still look at whether we can partner with another translation service to make a specific one for scholarly publishing. But at the moment, we're just trying to make sure that it allows the language translation that most people have already available to them through other services.
Yeah, that I think would be something very important to look into. I don't know if there is a question in the chat or not. Paul said it would be a good idea if the guidelines could be sent to us, Anne, and
somebody's very kindly put the Octopus.
Yeah, Ahmed. Yeah, that is really great. So does anyone else have a suggestion? Brainstorm on what features would make this platform easier for them to use other than the language. If there are any suggestions. Okay, Paul. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Lamis. I just want to ask if on the platform we will have access to some guidelines that will be so that we can get accustomed to the platform for use, or whether Alex or Tim will be able to send some of the leaflets that will really aid us in enhancing our knowledge in the usage of the platform. That's just the plea or the prayers that I'm just raising.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul. There's a link in the chat to the author guide, and on the Octopus platform itself, there's quite a lot of background. But what I'll do after this call is I'll make sure that we send out the sort of introduction to Octopus pack that you can get on top of, and then you can also forward to your colleagues as well, so that you've got everything at your fingertips.
All right, thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
That would definitely be great. And does anyone else have a comment, question? Because if not, I have many.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things is that, for example, let's say I'm going to bring in co-authors. Let's say I have a previous publication that I want to break it up in Octopus. So I have other co-authors. Do they all have to have an ORCID ID?
Yes, they do.
Or not?
They do, and they have, because they have to sign off the publication. So one of the things that we're trying very much to do is to build as much research integrity into the system as possible. So we want to make sure that every author has approved a publication and that they're all a verified author on that publication. So when you put your co-authors in, they all get an email that tells them that you have published something on Octopus and listed them as a co-author. They're given a link to the site. They may have to create a login if they haven't got one, so they'll go through the process, and then they can approve the publication. They put in their affiliations, and then you as the corresponding author get emailed when each person has done it. And as the corresponding author, you can also see when you log into Octopus on your sort of dashboard, you can see the status, so you can see which of your co-authors has approved it and which hasn't. And if you need to, you can use that to send a chaser or to correct their email address if you found that actually you've been using a wrong email address for them. So we've hopefully designed that system so that it works. But as somebody with lots of co-authors, I know I have to do some chasing to say, check your emails, please, and sign off. But I think it's important because we don't want anybody to be named on a publication where they're not an author or they didn't approve the publication.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then once they've done that, it means that they've got an author page on Octopus. So hopefully it's of benefit to them too.
Yeah, I think it like sort of passive encouragement for them to join the platform and to make them more curious to look into the platform. And one other question that I had is that, for example, if you're building on a publication in Octopus and you started with the research problem and you're moving on, like, is there sort of a final publication that like puts all of this together, or a person has to go through every one of them?
Yeah, no, there isn't a final publication because we're trying to break away from that model. We are at the moment building, or on our list of things to build, is a way to then easily submit as a paper a chain of publications. So that would allow you to select a chain of publications. And of course, you'd have to select each one individually because you want to select the one that's yours, not the one that somebody else. So you want to select and say, here are my 6-7 publications. Please put them all together into one document for me. And of course, you'd have to curate that a little bit to make sure, because they're written to be standalone, but it would give you a really good basis if you then wanted to submit that as a paper to a publication. So we were actually designing that along with the people who do registered reports, because we want to support that workflow, but it would work for normal papers as well. So that's something that's in the pipeline of development.
Yeah, that would be really helpful, I guess, to have it for an early career researcher. And then my second question is that, let's say someone had the problem, wrote the problem, and someone else suggested like a methodology for it. So when that person lists a methodology, does the originator of that research problem, are they cited in their publication, in that branch publication?
It's a good point. So essentially, when you've linked to another publication, you are, however far down the chain it is, you can see the kind of the parentage. And that means that when we build this thing that, creates a paper, imagine that you actually wanted to use somebody else's problem publication and you'd worked on it, but they'd written the original problem publication, then it would be bringing their work into it, and so they would then be automatically a co-author on the paper. So it includes everybody who has contributed to that chain that you're then bringing together.
Wow, yeah, this is amazing. It's really nice to know.
So actually getting those problem publications means you're at the base of lots of people's work. So
this is actually encouraging. Like, if you have a problem in mind, then you'll be a co-author in many other publications. So
we also
this
have
is an incentive,
that
I
data.
think.
We store that inside the DOI, so other systems should be able to automatically detect those relationships as well. So if you were to go to, an institutional repository with your Octopus publication, that system could scan the data from the Octopus publication to work it out sort of automatically. So it doesn't even need to be something people necessarily do as something when they're checking the publication. It can be included in the kind of wider infrastructure. This credit being the right and other things to do.
Wow. I think this is an important thing to highlight. I think for early career researcher, because this is what they're thinking about is, I want to get my name out there. So I think maybe something in the future that you could highlight, like when you go from the very start, then actually you'll have a lot of like publication going on. Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. So I think we're right on time. If no one else have a question or a comment, then I think we could close up this very informative session. And I feel like we'll need to have like follow-up sessions when all of us go and try on our own. I think we'll come with more questions, definitely. But if no one else, I'll leave it to you, Alex and Tim, like sort of to close it off.
Oh, well, thank you. I just want to say a massive thank you. It's been lovely to talk about it with you, and thanks for all the questions. Hopefully you've got our contact details in the chat there. And we've put a link there as well to another similar session to this, just the introduction section. So if you've got colleagues that you want to forward that to, or if you want to come again, then do come along to that one on the 27th of June. But I'm absolutely here for any follow-up questions, any problems that you have, and anybody that you want me to talk to on your behalf. So do get in touch. But thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, everyone.
And thanks for inviting us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And I think if you could, guys, like we gave you access to, like we included you in our Slack. So if you could post these sessions, I think it would be very, very helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely, so, we'll do that, and we'll send around the pack as well. Yes,
that would also be great. So I think thank you all. Thank you very much for this lovely session. I will see you in upcoming sessions.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.